We ride along in our bus on the city tour for a while, and then we get out and do some walking, especially in Lisbon. It is just a perfect city for strolling about on your own 2 feet and checking out the sights, especially when you want to get into the old section of town that's called the Alfama. Really, the only way to see it is by walking, and that's what we're about to do with our local guide who will take us through the little alleys.
In front of us we have now Alfama. Alfama, which is considered the oldest quarter in Lisbon. Actually, Alfama, this quarter was founded by the Arabs, and the name, it's still the Arabic name, Alfama. It means a place with springs, with water, spring water. In order to see Alfama, we do have to walk, as you can imagine. This huge building that you can see now at your right-hand side is the Cathedral of Lisbon. It's in the Romanesque style, as you can see. It looks like a fortress.
And now let's take a walk in Alfama and on up to the castle with our guide. The trams of Lisbon are one of the really quaint phenomena of this city. These picturesque old trams are a big part of the identity of Lisbon, something like the cable cars of San Francisco, and they've been running on their extensive routes for 100 years, providing a real service to visitors and to local commuters. Now, to get up top of the hill to St. George Castle, you could take a tram, number 28. In our case, we've come up on the bus with our guide who's going to tell us about it.
It was built in several different periods by different people. So what we have here now is the hill of the castle, although we cannot see the castle from here. But once in a while we see part of the wall, which means this wall, which was first started by the Arabs, it was then enlarged several times by the Christians, by the Portuguese. And the last wall was enlarged at the 14th century. It was a wall which was going down to the river, so it was going all around Lisbon. Till the 14th century, Lisbon was a walled-up town, completely surrounded by the wall of this castle. They incorporate one of the towers of the castle, as you can see. And the rest, unfortunately, disappeared. And now we are going up to the castle. It's full of ups and downs.
Alfama is the oldest section of Lisbon, founded in the time of the Romans, or perhaps even earlier, and then given shape by the Arabs, who didn't make any urban plan but just built alleys and homes as they were needed. Humble homes sprang up in the crowded network of alleys and tiny plazas following the original jumble created by the Arabs. Today, this remains a lower-class neighborhood with some apartments still lacking running water, mixed with the inevitable gentrification of new money and yuppie redevelopment. During the Middle Ages, it became the Jewish district, but after 1594, the Jews were evicted from Portugal, and the Alfama became home for sailors and fishermen.
Hello!
In order to explore Alfama, you need to walk. Preferably downhill, but the winding alleys will take you up and down like a slow-motion roller coaster. The Alfama is the old town, the old residential neighborhood of Lisbon. Alfama is a place to wander and follow your whimsy by turning whatever way looks best as you reach each corner.
We can see the architecture of this old quarter. Very old houses, as you can see. When I say old, most part of them, they had to be rebuilt or restored after the earthquake, so after 1755. Notice the streets, very narrow streets, the balconies and the lights, flowers on the windows, the laundry hanged out of the window to dry, as we all do here. Even in modern buildings, we don't like dry machines. Some of those buildings, they were like palaces. Like this one.
St. George's Castle is a romantic ruin with ancient stone walls and ramparts overlooking the city and lush landscaping that has transformed this fortress into one of the nicest parks in town. Swans and ducks glide along among the cool ponds and moats that wind through the tree-shaded castle grounds, making this a favorite place for locals and visitors to relax. While the castle is mostly gardens today, in ancient times this was the crowded, walled city where most of the people lived, and it would have been packed in with buildings that are now gone.
It was nothing like this. This is now a garden. But when the Arabs were living here, or the Christians, this was the city. So where we see now trees and gardens, there used to be houses, because it was tremendously difficult, dangerous to live outside the wall. So the people, they had to live inside the wall. So that's what I say, we have to use our imagination to see the castle how it was during the Middle Ages. People were living here inside the wall, inside the fortification. So the castle was the noble part of the city. It had always been. Part of the castle, it's now a ruin, as you can see. This part here, it was originally the palace where our kings lived from the 12th till the 16th century. We came here basically because of the view. And from here, we look at Lisbon, and it's like seeing Lisbon on a map. We can understand the city when we see it from here. We have the river in front of us, and the Atlantic, it's now in front of us, about 5 kilometers far from Lisbon. So Lisbon has a wonderful harbor, as you can see, not exactly in the Atlantic, but in the river, but not far from the Atlantic. We are only about 5 kilometers far from the Atlantic. So during the high season, we receive here many cruises. Some days in Lisbon, we have here in the harbor 3-4 cruises. Also the bridge, which Seattle remind you of San Francisco Bridge. It was built by the same company. That's why they look so much alike. This part of Lisbon here, in front of us now, this is 18th century Lisbon. Lisbon of the 19th century. It's on this at the side. This in here, it's Liberty Avenue. And now in front of us, as you can guess, we have Lisbon of this city, modern Lisbon. So that gives you the idea of Lisbon till a few years ago. Now we have the modern buildings, some of them good ones. We have there the biggest shopping center in Lisbon. It's open absolutely every day, Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, from 10 in the morning till 11 in the evening. So it's right over there. Right over there. That's the elevator that we just passed a few minutes ago, Santa Justa. Yeah, the grey one. Santa Justa is the name, and it was built in 1902. Take us to the top of the hill. Right behind the elevator, you can see the ruins of a Gothic church. It's Our Lady of Carmo. The church became a ruin, as so many others, during the earthquake, and it was never rebuilt. It's now an archaeological museum. And as you can see from here, Lisbon is far from being a flat city. Like Rome, Istanbul, San Francisco, Lisbon has 7 hills. That's probably the reason why Lisbon is such a beautiful city.
Why was Lisbon settled on this spot, do you think, originally?
Because of this bay over here.
The bay.
Yeah, because the Phoenicians and the Greeks, when they came in by boat naturally, they settled over there. And the first name that we know for this city is the Phoenician name, Alix Ubu. And Alix Ubu means a nice bay. So it was definitely the geographical position. Because, you know, in a way, this is not far from the Mediterranean. So they could come and go quite easy using their vessels. And they could trade. Metal, gold, silver. So it was basically the geographical position, which is an excellent one.
There's that main square down there.
St. George Castle is on top of the Alfama Hill, and it's the oldest surviving monument in Lisbon. So after enjoying a stroll through the grounds of the castle, exit through one of the gates in the wall and continue down the quaint lanes into the Alfama area. Lisbon is a compact area easily covered on foot. You'll be walking at first through several blocks around the castle that's called the Castello district, but it soon leads right down into Alfama.
We are now going to Alfama. It's completely different. It's a different community.
Yeah, this is the castle quarter.
Totally different from modern cities. It's a place where everybody knows everybody. They help each other. There is neighborhood. They don't suffer from loneliness as people are suffering now in modern cities. They have been there from generation to generation, so they all know each other.
Right.
Seated in the squares, playing cards, talking, and they are not isolated. They live as a community. And we lost already in modern cities that sense of living in a community. We don't know our neighbors anymore.
Really true.
As you can see in here, we are still walking along the wall of the castle. Huh? We are now going to walk in Alfama, the oldest quarter. Let's go. We are now in Alfama. Alfama, as I mentioned before, was first settled by the Arabs. And what is quite interesting about this quarter is that we had here a continuous occupation up to our days. We had the Arabs from the 8th till the 12th century. Then in 1147, when this was conquered by the Christians, the Arabs had to leave and the Christians came in. In the 15th century, this was the Jewish quarter. We had here 3 big synagogues. They don't exist anymore. And then in 1594, when the Jews had to leave, it happened here as it happened in Spain. We were being pressed by the Catholic kings of Spain. So when the Jews had to leave, the Christians came in again. And basically navigators and fishermen. In the 16th century, this was a quarter for navigators and fishermen. In nowadays, it's a quarter for everybody. But this quarter is different from the other quarters that we have in Lisbon, by the simple reason that the people, they have been living here from generation to generation. So they all know each other. This is a community. They don't suffer from loneliness. The children, they play in the streets. The old folks, they get together in the squares, they play cards. There is a lot of gossiping going on sometimes, but there is no loneliness. This is what I was explaining before. I have a problem, I tell my problem to my neighbor tells the next neighbor. In 1 hour everybody knows about the problem and it's no longer a problem. So this is the sense of community, that it still exists here, and we completely lost that in the modern quarters of Lisbon. We don't know our neighbors in the modern quarters of Lisbon. The houses here, they had to be restored after the earthquakes, but the plan of the quarter, it didn't suffer any alteration, because the houses in the 18th century, they were being rebuilt on the top of the ruined ones. So the houses may look different, but the streets, the squares, the blind alleys, the stairways, this is still Arabic. The plan is still Arabic, which means no plan at all. You know, the Arabs, they didn't really plan the city. They built the city as they needed. And the streets are very small, as you can see. We have to think that this was inside the wall. This was a walled up town. And in the Middle Ages, a big street inside the wall was a street big enough for 2 donkeys. So those streets are small because they had to save space. This was inside the wall of Lisbon.
For an authentic taste of Portugal, you might grab lunch in one of the tiny Alfama restaurants, or just sit at a terrace cafe and enjoy the splendid view. The neighborhood is alive with locals who treat these lanes as their outdoor living rooms. Most of the homes are quite small, and so people naturally gravitate outside to chat with their neighbors, do their laundry, linger in the little markets, visit with friends, and catch up on stories. Everyone knows everything about each other in this small, self-contained community which has been here for generations.
Do sul ao norte, da ilha da Madeira atrás os montes, ouvi gente cantar com a mesma graça, a nossa raça. O nosso canto é feito de alegria e de cansaço, e é por isso que eu lanço o meu abraço em cada canto. Vai ver de novo a malta que se agiganta no trabalho quando luta, quando canta. O nosso povo, a voz que anima, o grito de quem trabalha, dos ferrinhos do adufo na guitarra, na concertina. Ai! Eu digo.
You might even see a local carry his empty wine jug into the bar or corner market for a refill from a bigger jug.
Pour it right in.
This kind of basic system of filling up your own wine bottles in the shop is really a tradition that's found throughout Europe, especially in the smaller towns and the rural areas. It's a little unusual to see it in a big city, but in Lisbon, it's that kind of place that the old habits are still here. And this is such a friendly little market. And they really make you feel welcome when you come inside. It's more of a family feeling than it is a business. And these are neighbors who have known each other for their whole lives. So they really get along well here. And plus, it's a nice, inexpensive way to get your wine. Bring your own bottle in and refill it at the market. Many of Alfama's streets are actually steep, narrow staircases. Yeah, you could easily walk down and around and up and down and just simply meander through Alfama. You could walk straight downhill if you wanted to exit right out of the neighborhood. But then you'd be missing out on some of the really quaint and authentic charm of this very special place. Because residents are so used to talking with everyone, you'll find they are extremely friendly people. Now watch this kid who's taking a ride on the tram. He hops off and runs along and then he hops back on again. This is a sport for the young locals in Lisbon.